This employment law video is on the GDPR. The General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR, came into force on the 25th of May 2018. The GDPR applies to personal data. Personal data means any information relating to an identifiable person who can be directly or indirectly identified. Data protection principles. The data protection principles are as follows. Personal data must be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner. Personal data must be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. Personal data must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the purposes for which it is processed. Personal data must be accurate and kept up to date. Personal data must be kept for no longer than is necessary for the purposes for which the data is processed. Personal data must be processed in a manner that ensures appropriate security. The data controller, in this case the employer, must be able to show compliance with these principles. Data processing. Under the first principle, data will only be processed lawfully if at least one of the following conditions is met. The data subject has given consent to the processing of their personal data. The processing is necessary for the performance of a contract with the data subject or in order to take steps to enter into the contract. The processing is necessary to comply with legal obligations of the employer. The processing is necessary for the performance of a task carried out in the public interest, or the processing is necessary for the legitimate interests of the employer or the legitimate interests of a third party. Consent needs to be given freely, and given the unequal bargaining power between employers and employees, it may not always be deemed that consent has been given freely. Employers therefore may need to rely on another legitimate basis for processing data. For transparency, employers should provide employees at the time of collecting the data with privacy notices. Privacy notices should include the contact details of the employer, the purposes for processing their data, the type of personal data, the retention periods for the personal data, who the data will be shared with, and the legal rights of the employee. There are further conditions for processing special categories of personal data. For details on these special categories and the further conditions, please see my website. Accountability. Employers need to demonstrate that they are complying with the GDPR. Things may include having a detailed data protection policy, carrying out internal audits, keeping records, undertaking a data protection impact assessment, training staff, and appointing a data protection officer. Employers should also keep records of processing. Enforcement. The Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, may serve on employers information notices and assessment notices, enforcement notices, and penalty notices. Employees may complain to the ICO for breaches and may have the right to compensation from the employer for damages. That's my video on the GDPR. The usual caveat is that this video is for guidance only and should not be relied upon for specific advice. For more information, do visit my website, and if you're interested in receiving notifications on other employment law videos, do subscribe to my channel.